Oh boy, bombshell story from Ross Dellenger that confirms the SEC and the Big Ten did threaten to leave and form their own playoff when nobody could agree on a college football playoff format. And perhaps that threat is still being held out over everybody. Welcome into the channel. I am John Kurtz. Here on this channel, we talk college football, conference realignment, college hoops all day, every day. So please consider subscribing if you have not. Live shows typically Wednesdays and Sundays. We are going to be doing a live show tonight as you see this on Tuesday night this week, because there is so much going on. So make sure that you're locked in for that. Click subscribe, click the bell so you know when it is that I'm going live. And please like this video if you could. Very easy way to support the channel. You can also support the channel on Venmo at John-Kurtz-4. Boy, Ross Dellenger had a marathon of a piece with a bunch of captivating info. It's just a behind-the-scenes look at how we got to the point that we got to with the college football playoff, where there is such a disparity between the haves and the have-nots. And it's a pretty wild ride, so let's get into it. We're going to take a chunk of this here, and you're going to get the rest of the article and analysis on that on the live show tonight. So he starts in January of 2022. Inside a convention hall within the JW Marriott Hotel in downtown Indianapolis, the sport's most powerful leaders gathered to vote on expanding the college football playoff. 7 months of quibbling over an expansion format had finally led them to this pivotal moment. On the morning of Georgia's eventual win over Alabama in the national title game, they met in an effort to finalize a 12-team playoff. Instead, disagreements continued as three of the conferences, the Big Ten, ACC, and Pac-12 members of the now infamous alliance, pushed back against the proposal. Now, here is where Bob Bowlesby enters, and he's got a pretty nice cameo. At some point, as discussions grew heated, then Big 12 Commissioner Bob Bowlesby, frustrated and exhausted of the indecision, slowly packed his bag and began to rise from the table. Quote, "The meeting isn't over," someone told him. Quote, "It is for me," he shot back. What happened that day still lingers across college athletics. Incredible stuff from Bob Bowlesby there, and I can certainly respect that. And we knew it was the alliance holding things up, but all of this, I'm going to get to it, this really reinforces the point that Jim Phillips did so much acting against his own self-interest in this whole stupid charade that he put on here, and that is one big example of it, holding things up there in 2022. But Bob Bowlesby, you think of him as being pretty mild-mannered, right? Very monotone anytime he was speaking publicly, but he's got a little gusto in him, apparently. I mean, we saw that when he lost Texas and Oklahoma and the way that he went after ESPN and then reacted to grab 4 schools, but I was impressed by what we heard about Bob Bowlesby there. The article continues. Last month, more than 2 years later, commissioners agreed on a new playoff structure featuring an uneven revenue distribution model that is likely to have long-term financial impacts across the industry. The revenue model, a combined 58% of the cash flow of the playoff will flow into 2 conferences, the SEC and Big Ten. But could this have been avoided if a decision were made in 2022? Quote, I mean, this is where some things start to get interesting. Our inability to conclude a deal 2+ years ago had a pretty significant impact on where the financials ended up. That's MAC Commissioner John Steinbrecher, a leading voice in college sports who often chairs the college football playoff commissioner meetings. Quote, what was on the table in 2022 was simply different. The delay opened the door for continuing changes to where we ended up. So, yeah, I mean, the idea there would be, hey, it was on the table to just continue things the way that they were. Not only access to the playoff, but the financials, we presume, would not have changed there, which sounds way better if you're the ACC or the Big 12 right now, that you would be still getting that same cut of the college football playoff and not have the gap widening there. Now, would we still have a sizable gap between the Power 2 and everybody else? Yes, you would, because of the TV deals that you're still talking about a $20 or $30 million gap, but it would save you an extra 10 to 15, I guess more like 12. It would save you an extra like $12 to $13 million in the gap that's coming in the playoff. That's not going to be enough to get Florida State or Clemson to drop their lawsuits or completely solve everything going on in the ACC, but it would help. It would be a little bit better, and it would take away the very public acknowledgement that, oh, yeah, we are second-class citizens here with the playoff and how this is working. I said it at the time. I'll continue to say it now. It was so dumb of the ACC. And, you know, I suppose the Pac-12, they had bigger problems, but the Pac-12 as well, to be pushing against what was going on then in 2022. The article continues. There is a point of contention on how there is a point of contention on how finalized a new college football playoff contract was in 2022. Even Hawkins used the word speculated to describe any tentative deal. But Bowlesby remembers that the proposal was much more, quote, measured and fair than what was adopted last month. And Sankey believes that the 2022 proposal offered, quote, the opportunity to continue with the same approach. So Sankey's telling you, and Bowlesby is telling you, this thing was better for everybody involved, other than maybe the Big Ten or SEC in 2022. But we decided, not really we if you're Bowlesby, but the group at large decided to put up too much of a fight to let that go through. And guys like Jim Phillips wind up paying for it because their league is now getting a lesser percentage of the revenue. But here is what Jim Phillips says. Not everyone remembers it that way. Quote, there were no guarantees at that time that the revenue or voting would stay the same, said Phillips, the ACC commissioner. So do you believe Jim Phillips, the guy who was throwing a temper tantrum at that point in time, working against his own self-interest? Or do you believe Bob Bowlesby, who very much had an interest in getting things signed, sealed, and delivered in 2022, like Jim Phillips should have, because it would have been better for his league? Do we believe Bob Bowlesby and Greg Sankey, right, who would have at that point no reason? At that point, it was something that would be worse for Sankey's league than what actually happened. Like, you've got those two guys saying, hey, this was ready to go and it was going to be better. Do we really think that those two are lying based on Jim Phillips kind of acting like a petulant child this whole time and holding things up way too long, jeopardizing even access to the playoff, jeopardizing the Big Ten and the SEC breaking off and doing their own thing? But particularly here, that's just an infuriating quote that Phillips is the guy still standing there like, no, I was actually right. Phillips is the last commissioner of the alliance who remains in college athletics. Kevin Warren, then of the Big Ten, is now the CEO and president of the Bears. George Kliavkov was dismissed earlier this year. The three of them did not support expansion in 2022 for an assortment of reasons. And here we go. We get some Rose Bowl talk, which is always good. The Pac-12's interests were with the Rose Bowl, which was at first against shifting its date and time for inclusion into the expanded playoff. It eventually did. The Big Ten wanted its champion to have an automatic berth, and the ACC's concern laid mostly with athlete health and well-being, given the extra games played in an expanded field. Something at least partially rectified, Phillips said, with changes to the holistic calendar. I don't mean to scoff at athlete health, but was that really it? Jim Phillips, you were that concerned with athlete health that was the thing? Boy. I don't know. And then him coming around to say, well, it has actually been partially rectified. Well, come on, man. Then what were you doing at the time? This all looks so silly. Quote, those three conferences were very specific about the areas that still needed to be addressed to move forward, and none of those ended up being captured to a conclusion agreeable to everyone, Phillips said. To say that led us to a completely different structure is wrong. Phillips, I hate this guy. I can't stand this guy. He is the one guy throughout this article that's basically saying, like, no, you guys are all wrong because I was taking a moral stand for what's right. Jim Phillips, dude, you cost all of us Big 12 fans and ACC fans like $12 million per school in gap between the Big Ten and SEC. After the Pac-12's collapse, the swelling of other leagues, and increasing pressures of athlete revenue sharing, the sport's two juggernaut conferences negotiated a one-sided deal, in part by using a lingering belief they'd abandon all others to form their own postseason. Here's the key. Would the SEC have really taken its proverbial ball and left the college football playoff? Money quote from Greg Sankey. Absolutely. Would the SEC have really taken its proverbial ball and left the playoff? Absolutely. Greg Sankey told Yahoo Sports. When we ended that set of meetings in January 2022 without a decision, I was clear. If you're going to walk away from this opportunity, we are going to reevaluate our position on format, revenue sharing, and governance. People called me after the latest deal and said, why did you take a hard line? Why did you put us in this position? I said, you guys walked away from the deal. Well, I would love to know if one of those calls and one of the people that were asking him that was Jim Phillips himself. Sankey's basically like, look, Jim, you screwed it up, dude. You screwed it up. We gave you a much better deal and you threw it in the trash. Didn't want to deal with it because of whatever your player safety concerns were or whatever it was. You tossed it out. So now I'm not going to give you this opportunity twice. You just like it or not, Sankey holds the cards, man. He's got the power. You can't mess with him. You got to take what you can when you get it. So it is infuriating to read all of that, man. There is so much more left in this article. I am not even like halfway through what I plan to do in this standalone video that's going to serve basically as a tease for the live show tonight. We'll cover it all. We're going to try to get to Florida State as well. They took a loss in court, although kind of a loss with an asterisk in court. And that was a home court appearance as well in Tallahassee. And the Pac-12 is no longer officially a Power 5 conference for autonomy conference. They're not an autonomous conference anymore. They lost that status officially. So a lot of news has been happening and a lot to cover. Promise that we will get to it on the channel. Make sure you tune in for the live show tonight. Should kick that off around 8 o'clock. If you could like this video on your way out the door, I would much appreciate it. And let me know what you think in the comments. How much are you buying Sankey's threat here that they would have left? And how much does that cloud things moving forward? Perhaps Sankey's still holding that over everybody's heads now that it's basically out there here in this article. Let me know what you think. Tune in for the live show, and I will talk to you all soon. Take care.